Elena had never liked courtrooms. They smelled of polished wood, tension, and expensive perfume, the kind worn only by people who had never worked a day with their hands. She usually passed by them with her mop and bucket, invisible to everyone except when someone needed the floor dried, right now. But today was different. She had been told there was spilled coffee on the corridor tiles, nothing unusual, so she hurried with her cart, head down, concentrating on not being noticed. Her rubber shoes squeaked softly as she approached the double doors. Inside, the trial of the year was underway. She could hear the muffled arguments through the wall, the thud of the judge's gavel, the rhythm of camera shutters. Every sound filled her with the instinct to walk faster, get the job done, and disappear. Then it happened. A sudden crash, like a chair being knocked over, echoed from the courtroom. Elena paused mid-swipe. She barely had time to turn her head when the door slammed open with a violent bang. A man burst out. The famous defense attorney Daniel Strom, his suit disheveled, tie hanging crooked. His eyes were wide with panic, the look of someone who had already accepted he was running for his life. He nearly collided with Elena. "Move! Get out of the way!" he shouted, voice cracking. She froze, gripping her mop handle as he shoved past her. Papers scattered from his briefcase, fluttering like frantic white birds across the floor. Daniel didn't bother to pick them up, he just sprinted down the corridor, footsteps echoing like rapid gunfire. The next second, 2 security guards stormed out behind him. "Stop him! Stop that man!" one yelled. Elena instinctively stepped aside as they raced after Daniel, almost knocking her cart over. For a moment, everything slowed. The dropped briefcase lay at her feet, half open, spilling confidential documents onto her freshly cleaned tiles. The echoes of Daniel's escape faded into the distance. Reporters inside the courtroom murmured in surprise. The judge's irritated voice demanded order. And Elena stood in the middle of it all, mop dripping onto the floor, realizing she was the only person left in the hallway. She should have walked away. She should have let someone else handle it. But instead, she reached down and picked up the fallen briefcase. It felt heavier than it looked. And it would change her life forever. Elena barely had time to straighten herself when the double doors to the courtroom slammed open again, this time not from panic, but from a wave of frantic staff rushing out like bees from a shaken hive. The judge's assistant, short, red-faced, sweating through his collar, spotted her instantly. His eyes locked on the briefcase in her hands. "You," he barked, pointing. Elena blinked. She glanced behind herself, certain he was speaking to someone else. The hallway was empty. "Me. Yes, you." He barreled toward her with the urgency of a man trying to keep an entire courthouse from collapsing. "You're with the defense team, right?" She stared at him, speechless. Her gray uniform glistened under the fluorescent lights. She still held her mop in one hand. How on earth did she look like anyone's lawyer? "I'm the janitor," she managed to say. But the man didn't even hear her. He was already grabbing her by the elbow and pulling her toward the courtroom doors. "We don't have time for this. The judge is furious. Levin cannot be left unrepresented, not in a case like this. Grab the files, come on." Elena tried to resist, stumbling in her rubber shoes. "No, wait, you don't understand. I'm not." The assistant thrust the fallen documents deeper into her arms, piling folders on her until her vision was full of legal pages she didn't understand. "Perfect, perfect," he muttered, completely ignoring the terror. Widening her eyes. "Just sit down and keep the defendant calm until we get a replacement attorney." He pushed the heavy doors open and practically shoved her inside. A wave of heat, light, and noise crashed over her. Cameras pivoted and clicked as though a celebrity had entered. Whispering swept through the crowd like wind through tall grass. People leaned forward, some squinting, others pointing. Elena froze in the doorway, clutching the briefcase, folders drooping in her arms. This can't be real. But before she could think, she was nudged forward. A guard guided her, gently but firmly, to the defense table. And there he was. Grigory Levin, the millionaire at the center of the storm, sat waiting. Hands folded, expression unreadable. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, almost unsettling, swept over her uniform, her gloves, the smudge of cleaner on her sleeve. For a heartbeat, Elena expected him to laugh. Or shout. Or demand a real lawyer. But he didn't. He only tilted his head slightly, as if assessing a puzzle no one else could solve. Elena lowered herself into the chair, trembling so hard the metal legs squeaked. The documents shook in her hands. Her heart pounded loud enough to drown out the murmurs. The judge's gavel slammed down. Order! Order! He thundered, glaring at the chaos. Then his gaze landed on Elena. His eyebrows shot up. Who is this? Elena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She couldn't even form her own name. The assistant spoke up quickly. Temporary representative for the defense, Your Honor. The judge looked like he might faint. She's wearing rubber gloves. The assistant whispered loudly, budget cuts. A wave of laughter rippled across the room. Elena wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. But when she dared to look sideways, she caught Grigory Levin watching her with a calm, almost unnerving focus. No pity, no mockery, just interest, as though he were thinking, why her, why now? And Elena, breathless and terrified, realized with growing dread. She was expected to speak. Elena could feel every heartbeat like a hammer in her chest. Her hands were stiff, fingers locked around the stack of papers she didn't understand, and the weight of 1,000 eyes pressed down on her like a collapsing ceiling. The judge cleared his throat, exasperated but resigned. Ms. he prompted. Elena swallowed. Her lips parted, but her voice barely found strength. Elena, she whispered. My name is Elena. And your last name? Volkova. The judge repeated it slowly, as though trying to make sense of it. Ms. Volkova, are you aware that you are currently sitting in the defense attorney's seat? Her throat tightened. I didn't mean to. Before she could finish, the prosecutor jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this is absurd. This woman is clearly not a legal representative. He squinted, leaning forward. Is she holding a mop bucket? A few reporters stifled giggles. Cameras clicked. Elena felt her face burn. The judge raised his hand. I am fully aware of the situation. But until Mr. Strom is located, the defendant cannot be left without counsel. He turned to Elena again. Ms. Volkova, do you wish to make a statement? She shook her head rapidly. I don't wish to, I can't. I'm not supposed to be here. I just clean. Then you may simply confirm the defendant's plea, the judge interrupted impatiently. We will adjourn shortly after. Elena stared at the polished wooden desk. She stared at her gloves. She stared at the documents she couldn't read. A moment ago she had been sweeping a hallway. Now the entire country was watching her. Her breath trembled as she looked toward Grigory Levin. He sat perfectly still, posture regal, eyes fixed on her, not scrutinizing, not amused, assessing. Calculating. His voice was low. When he leaned slightly toward her. Speak, he murmured. She almost jumped. I can't. I don't know anything. You know honesty, he said simply. Today, that might be more valuable than law. She blinked. What was that supposed to mean? But then the judge struck the gavel again. Ms. Volkova. The court is waiting. Elena's mind raced. She knew nothing about legal terminology, but she did know people. Years of cleaning offices taught her to observe, quietly, invisibly. She had overheard arguments, negotiations, secrets whispered by people who thought a janitor didn't understand. And something about this case had always bothered her. She took a shaky breath. I don't know the law, she began, her voice trembling but audible. And I don't know what Mr. Strom planned to say, but I do know that something about this case feels wrong. A hush fell instantly. She continued, gathering courage from the silence. You accuse Mr. Levin of planning everything alone. But even I've heard people say no one man could pull this off. There were deals, signatures, transfers, things that needed more than one person. Things that don't add up. The prosecutor bristled. This is speculation from an unqualified. The judge held up a hand, stopping him. Elena exhaled, feeling her legs shake. I'm not a lawyer, she said again. I'm just someone who listens. Someone who notices when people lie, because rich people lie a lot around cleaning staff. They don't think we matter. A ripple of chatter swept the audience. She lowered her gaze. I don't know all the facts. But I know this case deserves more than a rushed judgment. And that something is missing. When she finally dared to look at Grigory again, she found his expression changed. No longer curious. No longer amused. Now he looked impressed. Deeply. Dangerously. The judge leaned back, tapping his pen. Well, he said slowly, that was, unexpectedly insightful. The prosecutor glared daggers at her. Elena's heart pounded. She had only spoken the truth. But the truth, spoken by the wrong person at the wrong moment, had just shifted the entire courtroom's atmosphere. She could feel it, so could Grigory. And for the first time since Daniel Strom ran for his life, Elena realized. She had been pulled into something far bigger than a courtroom mistake. The holding room was colder than Elena expected, sterile, windowless, humming with the sound of a single flickering fluorescent light. She stood awkwardly near the metal table, still clutching the briefcase as though it might explode if she let go. Guards had escorted her here immediately after the judge called a recess, and now she waited, heart racing, palms damp inside her gloves. The door clicked. Grigory Levin stepped inside. Without security. Without his entourage. Just him, tall, composed, and far more intimidating in a small room than he had been surrounded by cameras. Elena froze. For a moment, he simply studied her. Not the way rich men looked at someone beneath them. Not the way lawyers examined witnesses. His gaze was sharper, calculating, but strangely gentle at the edges, like someone examining a rare, unexpected find. He approached the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down with slow, deliberate calm. "Please," he said softly. "Sit." Elena's knees trembled as she lowered herself into the chair opposite him. The briefcase sat between them like a silent witness. He tapped its metal clasp lightly. "You picked this up," he said. "You didn't have to." "I didn't think," she admitted. "It was just lying there." "Many people saw it," Grigory replied. "Only one person touched it." Elena didn't know if that was praise or accusation. She stared at her hands. "I shouldn't have been in that courtroom. Your assistant grabbed me. I'm sorry if I made things worse." Grigory's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "You made things interesting." She blinked. "Interesting. Your statement disrupted the prosecution's momentum. You confused them." He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing in thought. "Most importantly, you spoke with no agenda. No rehearsed lines. Genuine truth. Do you know how rare that is in a courtroom?" She shook her head, unsure how to respond. Grigory leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Daniel didn't run because he was guilty. He ran because someone threatened him. Someone who wants me convicted. Someone who wants this," he tapped the briefcase, "to disappear forever." Elena felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You mean, someone inside the system?" Grigory's jaw tightened. "They're everywhere. Prosecution. Finance departments. Politics. My former partner, Anton Vargan, paid them to erase him from this narrative and leave me as the sole villain." Elena frowned. "But the documents, they looked official." "Exactly," Grigory said with quiet anger. "Forged with access only powerful hands possess." Her mind spun. She looked down at the briefcase again, realizing she held something far more dangerous than spilled papers. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. He paused, then spoke with a sincerity that felt heavier than the walls around them. "Because when everyone else fled, pretended, or lied, you stood there and spoke truth. And that makes you the only person in this building I can trust." Elena's breath caught. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not her employers. Not her coworkers. Not even her own family. She was just the janitor, the woman people ignored, stepped around, sometimes shouted at for cleaning too slowly. But Grigory Levin, a man whose life was collapsing publicly and violently, was looking at her as though she were a lifeline. She didn't know whether to be flattered, or terrified. "Mr. Levin," she murmured, "I don't think I can help you." "Maybe not as a lawyer," he said. "But you have eyes, ears, instincts. And those are exactly what I need." Elena stiffened. "What do you think is going to happen next?" she asked quietly. Grigory's expression darkened, shadows cutting across his features. "They aren't just trying to convict me," he said. "They're trying to silence anyone who knows the truth." He looked at her with unsettling clarity. "That includes Daniel. And now, it includes you." Elena didn't sleep that night. Not after what Grigory told her. Not after the guards escorted her home with the same awkwardness people use when carrying a fragile, unwanted object. She paced her tiny apartment, replaying every second of the courtroom chaos. Her name on the news. Her face on social media. Her trembling voice saying things she hadn't planned to say. By morning, the whole country knew who she was. The janitor who defended a millionaire. Some called her brave. Others called her insane. Most called her unqualified. Elena ignored it all. She had to. The bail hearing was today, and the judge had specifically ordered her presence. She wasn't sure if it was a punishment or a compliment. As she stood outside the courthouse once again, this time surrounded by microphones, camera flashes, and curious strangers, she wished more than anything she could vanish into the floor she used to mop. When the guards finally ushered her inside, she felt dozens of eyes tracking her every step. She sat at the defense table again, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Grigory entered moments later, escorted by officers. He looked surprisingly calm, even dignified, as if stepping into the spotlight was second nature. He sat beside her and whispered, "Remember what you said yesterday. Just be honest." Elena almost laughed. Honesty was the only thing she had to offer. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The hearing began. The prosecutor launched into a speech dripping with certainty. Grigory was dangerous, wealthy enough to flee, guilty enough to hide. Elena barely listened. She kept staring at the documents she'd studied half the night. She didn't fully grasp them, but she understood enough to see patterns. And inconsistencies. And missing signatures. And dates that didn't match. There was a moment when she felt Grigory's gaze on her, as if silently asking, "Are you ready?" She wasn't. But she stood anyway. "Your Honor," she said, startled by her own boldness. "I'd like to say something." A ripple of disbelief swept the courtroom. The judge sighed heavily. "Ms. Volkova, very well. Proceed." Elena lifted one page from the briefcase, one she had read several times, and held it with both trembling hands. "This document," she began, "was included in Mr. Strom's files. It lists financial transfers that supposedly connect Mr. Levin to illegal accounts." She paused, breath shallow. "But the dates don't match any of the recorded transactions from the central bank. Not one. And this signature," she pointed, voice growing steadier, "is missing the security watermark that all government-verified documents have." The prosecutor's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. "Is this true?" A bank expert was called to examine the paper. He confirmed it within seconds. "Yes, Your Honor. This document is not authentic." Chaos erupted, reporters shouting, cameras exploding with flashes, whispers rising like wildfire. The prosecutor stammered, there must be, an explanation." But there was none. At least, none that didn't point to corruption. The judge struck his gavel. "Given this revelation, and the uncertainty surrounding key evidence, bail is granted." Gasps, shouts, disbelief. Grigory turned to Elena, his expression softening in a way she hadn't seen before. "You did it," he murmured. She almost smiled, until the world shifted in an instant. A black SUV screeched to a halt outside the courthouse steps. Doors flew open. A man leaned out the window. Something metallic glinted in the sun. Elena's instinct screamed. Before her mind processed it, she grabbed Grigory's arm and yanked him sideways behind a massive stone pillar. Crack! A gunshot exploded across the plaza. People screamed. Reporters dropped their cameras. Officers dove for cover. Elena's ears rang as another shot fired, this one hitting a marble step inches from where Grigory had stood. Without thinking, she threw herself over him, shielding him with her body as more shots cracked through the air. The cameras pointed at them, capturing everything. A janitor, small, terrified, shaking, covering a millionaire with her own life. Chaos blurred into sirens, shouting, scrambling boots, and the screech of a chasing police car. The final thing Elena heard before darkness closed around the edges of her vision was Grigory's voice, low and shaken. "Don't you dare die on me." And then, everything went silent.